In this video, how to use low-dose anabolics and metformin as add-ons for TRT.
Welcome to this channel. If you want to learn more about the most cutting-edge science-based information in the world of hormone optimization, please subscribe and hit that notification bell.
Hello everyone, welcome to the TRT and Hormone Optimization YouTube channel. I'm Danny Bossa, joined today, Jim Brown, author. How you doing, Jim?
Good. How are you?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Today's topic. I just said author, but there's a whole bunch of other things too, but I first knew him as an author. Today's topic is the guys that are on TRT, feel optimized, and we get these questions a ton in our Facebook group TRT and Hormone Optimization, same as the YouTube channel. They're asking what other little extras that we can add. And there's some of you, actually, there's a very small handful of you that are going to get so upset with this video, and I don't care. Because we get this question asked quite a bit, and there's a small handful of you that are saying, well, it's not TRT, and it's no longer TRT, and how can we be a TRT channel if we're talking about these other things? This is a question we get a lot. There's some guys that are on TRT, they're training like crazy, they don't want to do full-blown cycles, they're looking to add a little something to get a little, maybe an anabolic boost, or a little bit of a fat-burning boost, or a little bit of some kind of a over and above what they're getting with TRT, without necessarily saying, I'm going to go do full-blown cycles of tren and whatever else. So that's the topic we're going to talk about today. And we're also going to touch upon metformin and its use. We'll find out through Jim Brown if this is something that he feels is a good thing to use or not a good thing to use. So Jim, we'll use me as an example. I'm on a really decent dose of TRT, no sides, no issues, doing well. Training now, summer's coming. I want to start getting into the training a little bit heavier. I don't want to do full-blown cycles. Health is really of, an essence for me because that's kind of the whole reason I got into TRT to begin with, is to be healthy. What are some of the things that one can do to add something where it would not be detrimental to health? And is it something that you add year-round? Is it something that you add from time to time? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, let's just keep it specifically to what's being prescribed. Okay. What I've seen prescribed personally, maybe what you've seen is different from me, but I mean, generally we're talking about a nandrolone, some Anavar. I've seen Proviron scripted. I've seen growth hormone scripted. So I think that kind of narrows it down a little bit, but that's what we're talking about, right? I mean, we could go into full blown anabolic class later, but for most of the guys, legality is a concern, number one, and these are things that are being offered by a lot of clinics, and so I get a lot of questions about it. Hey, what do you think about this or this or this? Well, first of all, we're going to go over just the basic thing that if you were a client and you came to me with that question that you just posed, I would say, send me your food logs, send me your training logs, because that's where we start on everything. Okay, if your TRT is dialed in, you're symptom-free, you're at a good dose, you don't have any issues, that's great. But the first place I would look, and we talked about this kind of privately, right, is I need your food logs, I need your training logs. Mm-hmm. So that's the first place I would look to help somebody, or if I were trying to diagnose my own issue or set up my next phase of a program, that's where I would see if I'm leaving anything on the table in those two areas first. Secondly, if you wanted to add something on top of that and your doctor was on board and he was going to script you something, say like, a nandrolone compound. Typically that's in a dosage that's not going to be, in my opinion, too harmful for people. It's usually 100 to 200 milligrams a week. I think 200 is the most that I've ever seen. Is that concurrent with what you've seen scripted?
Yeah, I'm seeing more like 50 to 100. Scripted, okay. I don't know if I've ever seen 200, but 100 seems to be kind of that average dose.
Okay. Yeah, I think the max I've seen is 200 a week. And, the way that's, I think, made okay is either joint pain or muscle wasting, one or the other. I don't, depends who's documenting it, but I've never received any joint pain benefit from nandrolone or any of its compounds, but I know a lot of people have reported that. I've always taken things when I was experimenting with the different drugs when I was bodybuilding. I would be on a baseline of testosterone. I would have my blood work done to see where I was at. I would add compound X, and I would titrate up from a dosage that I thought was pretty low for standards at the time and work my way up until I started to feel it and get some type of an effect. And I would keep the dosage there for however long I was going to run it, usually a couple months. And at the end of that, I would get, while I was still on the compound, I'd be taking blood pressure and I would get blood work done to see what the implications of its usage were and whether or not it was worth what I got out of it. For me at the time, I'm 27, early 30s, none of the compounds had negative effects on my blood work. My blood pressure never went skyrocketing. And by today's standard, I was on, a fitness chick dose, that at the time was considered a real dose, but, I worked my way up to just about to get an effect and then stayed there. I didn't keep going like, hey, the guy at the gym said do 500 a week. I experimented up to see that. We're going to have a dog barking here for a minute, but
that's okay.
So I would approach that the same way if I was a TRT client, and I was looking to add something else. My physician maybe suggested nandrolone. I would do blood work, baseline test, you see where you're at. And then I would run the compound for 4 to 6 weeks, something like that, get another blood work and see kind of if it has any implications from there. A lot of times guys are more sensitive that you'll see the blood pressure maybe change. So I would keep track of that as well. And then overall feeling as far as are you going to have negative effects from it. One of the things that's pretty common with nandrolone compound is libido issues. And so, if you're starting to have libido issues a month in and you're not putting on 30 pounds of muscle a week or whatever, your expectation is, then that would be part of your decision to say, hey, is this really doing me any good? So I would just use that kind of theory on anything that I was going to, take legal or not.
Gotcha.
What's the risk going to be? And is the risk worth what I'm getting out of it? And a lot of times, nandrolone's pretty safe. I mean, I can give you a link that you can post up in the YouTube channel afterwards that shows some, some negative thoughts on DECA use. But, overall, I think that guys could get away with running that, a few times a year. I don't know whatever it's scripted for. I tend to do longer runs, maybe, 3-4 months, and see if it's worth what the negatives, if any, were and what the gains were. But I don't know if, I haven't talked to a lot of guys that have just added 50 or 100 milligrams a week, but I would assume that your gains aren't going to be very substantial. Maybe a couple ticks up in recovery, but if you're not on point with your training and nutrition and take advantage of that, increased recovery potential, then you're not going to benefit from it.
Yeah, I think that type of dose, the 50 to 100 is really, I've got sore joints. I've got an issue with my back. Like I always had some weird back issues. And when I tried that low dose within about 2 weeks, in my case, it helped tremendously.
Yeah.
More so than anything that testosterone had done, which was great. And I decided I was going to stick to it for a while and then eventually do bloods and whatnot. But I found for me, it started affecting me in a negative way. I just started feeling lethargic and libido was tanking and had a hard time getting out of bed and just not feeling myself. And when I stopped, like a couple of weeks later, I'm back to my old self. I got other friends of mine that are taking higher doses and they're fine. So, you're talking more about 50 to 100 not having a real anabolic effect.
Right.
Even at 100, I did feel a little bit stronger at the gym, but the bad issues were outweighing the good, I guess you could say at that point.
Yeah. And that's the decision that you have to make. Am I getting out more than the negatives of it? When you jump to something like Anavar, you're typically, if you're a guy 35, 30s up to 50 some years old, if you're going to take an effective dose of Anavar, for most people, your HDL is going to be cut in half almost immediately. And so, then my theory would be then what's my cardiovascular risk overall? Do I have genetic history? Do I have issues already ongoing? How good a place was I to begin with? And then where does this put me in a risk potential? If I'm taking, and I don't know what an effective dose is for someone. I know that 20 milligrams isn't going to really make a difference for a male typically. For a female, it will, but for most guys, I think you're looking at 40 and above. For me, it's much larger than that to get something out of it. But again, if it's going to cut your HDL in half and you have a genetic history or you're predisposed by any means is being on that for 6 weeks, going to justify the pound of muscle that you're going to get? I don't know. It's not that's not a decision for me to make, but that would be someone's, their own decision to make. And, that's how I would approach it. When I get asked about it, that's exactly how I break it down.
So what are some of the things you would consider to be the things that would indicate harm in blood work outside of, let's say, cholesterol? There's going to be a hematocrit. There's going to be like, what would be your top, top 5 or less, whatever?
Well, I think, one of the reasons why you would back down on testosterone is if your hematocrit gets way out of control and you can't bring it down. Right. I'm not a fan of drawing blood for that. I am overall for donating blood, but it really doesn't affect your hematocrit. I mean, you bring it down just a little bit, 3%, but it comes right back up, or at least that was my experience with it. The only way to bring it down, there's a couple ways, right? You can increase cardio. That's worked. You can hydrate, stay hydrated, because a lot of times when you take your blood test in the morning, you've gone 8-10 hours without drinking anything, and so you roll into the blood test completely dehydrated in a state that you really shouldn't be in anyway. So I don't know if that's the best indicator of what's going on all the time, but anyway, if you're hydrating, you go in and you get your blood test done and it's out of control, you can't bring it down with cardio, then you just have to lower the dosage. So that would be one of the things that I would say, yeah, you absolutely have to lower your test dosage. And in my experience, when I was using super physiological levels, that's one of the reasons why I decided to stop doing that at that level, because my body was not handling the high dosage of test the way it once did. And my hematocrit was starting to climb and I couldn't bring it down. And that's using all the tricks, right? Everything all the time, massive cardio, didn't do it. So I just had to back off, go down, and then crawl back up to a level that was more of a human dose. And, I never had a problem again, but I know that some guys on TRT have a problem at, whatever it is, 200 milligrams, hematocrit gets 55, 57, everybody starts freaking out. Cardio's not working. Then yeah, you would probably have to lower that, let it stabilize. And a lot of times you can creep back up and it doesn't happen again. So it's one of those things that's one that I would back off on. If I was taking an oral compound like Anavar and I had family history, maybe I had some cardiovascular issues on my own. I had a CAC scan and I was in the hundreds or 200s or 300s, maybe some high blood pressure back and forth. I probably wouldn't use an oral anabolic like that, because it's going to shut your HDL down. And so you're going to be in what I would call a compromised position with your lipids, where your HDL's low, your LDLs are higher. A lot of people, you're going to get a massive change in LDLs with that, or triglycerides. And so I wouldn't think that the risk justifies whatever the gains are going to be out of that, because still it's going to be at a dosage where you're not gaining, 10 pounds of muscle in a month or whatever it is.
Right. Right.
So that's how I would evaluate it. And those are the ways that I would approach it.
Okay. So outside of a small dose nandrolone for, the joints and whatever, and maybe a little bit of an anabolic boost, Anavar, same. What other types of, you're talking about HGH earlier. How much of benefit are you seeing guys getting an HGH? I'm getting a lot of different reports. Some are saying it's like life-changing. I shed so much fat and everything just improved. And then I got the other guys that's like, I was taking 3 IU a day and for 6 months, and I'm not seeing any difference at all.
Yeah. One other thing I want to add to what we were just saying, of course, blood pressure is the one thing too.
Yes.
So that's something, if that ever changes and goes up, I would address that immediately, and isolate whatever the variable is on that, and deal with that, because that's probably, it's one of the most dangerous things or conditions that you can have, I think, cardiovascular wise. But so growth hormone, well, a lot of the problem is there's a lot of fake growth hormone out there. So I know that, here locally, somebody had some scripted bought from a physician, and it wasn't a pharmaceutical brand. It was actually an underground brand. And I don't know the legalities of it. I don't know what all that entailed, but it was an underground, a UGL brand of GH. And so that could or could not be real. I don't know. So people who go on it for the first time, never used it before, a TRT person, and they're injecting 3 IUs a day and don't see any difference, I would highly suspect that it's fake. No matter where you're getting it, no matter how trustworthy you think X, Y, and Z is, I would suspect it's fake. If you do get results from it, typically it's a little bit of fat loss, improved recovery, maybe overall muscle fullness throughout the day. But to really get to what I would experience, or what I've experienced a few times, really physique changing results, it's at a much higher dose. It's with anabolics on board, and most of the time it's with insulin, exogenous insulin usage too.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No, same thing though too. I've had guys may experience some strange issues in trying growth hormone for the first time too. I had a friend of mine that was training a long time ago. He got scripted from a doctor, paid God knows what at the time for it, but he was doing 2 IUs a day, and he had this massive edema all over his body, swelled up, blood pressure went crazy. Stopped the injections for 3 days, all went away, went back on, came back, and just said, hey, maybe if you're going to ride it out, it might equalize. I don't know. I've never seen it, but probably not a good idea for you. And so, didn't continue on the course. But some people will react with a high blood pressure, or, something changed like that, maybe an edema issue, but it's not very common.
I had a podcast this past week with Jean-François Tremblay from Montreal. He's one of the leading researchers in peptides. And he was telling me that one of the side effects of taking too much HGH, you can actually develop some carpal tunnel syndrome. And a lot of people are getting HGH from China, and they were actually producing some pretty decent HGH in China. And people say, oh, I'm getting the carpal tunnel. So, I know I got the legit stuff. Apparently what they started doing is they started shipping HGH that wasn't actually HGH, but they put in a compound that actually gave a side effect of carpal tunnel. So people were getting to carpal tunnel thinking they had real HGH in it, and it wasn't. They were just literally getting carpal tunnel, and that was it.
To my knowledge, over the last 20 years of being in this game, the way that we, or I should say people on the internet, not me, the way that people on the internet have tested growth hormone is you take an IM injection. 3 hours later, you're getting 3 hours on the dot, you're getting your blood drawn for a GH serum test. And you get that result back, and that equates back to, we think that you have actual growth hormone. Then you follow that up 3-4 weeks later, after you had a baseline IGF, with a follow-up IGF and another growth hormone serum test. And that's the only way that I know how to test, or I've heard of testing underground growth hormone. But then you can get really deep in the weeds with this 192, 191 debate, and whether those have actual differences. And, I've had really, really great results from growth hormone that I've tested, or that has been tested. And I've had not so good, almost none type of results from growth hormone that's been tested and verified. So I don't really know. I think a lot of it has to do with your insulin sensitivity at the time, whether you've been on it before, and your body does develop these antibodies with it. And I think it was Scott Stevenson had a bunch of information on that on one of the boards. It's been a long time, but somebody really broke that down. And, if you develop antibodies to these, you're not going to get results out of it. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. It's one of those things. Some people react really well to it. Some people don't.
So you had never figured out if it was like, oh, I'm getting great on 192 and not so much on the other one. It's just,
no,
it really made no difference.
Not for me. I didn't, it was either hit or miss. But the serum test would show that it was legit. But I don't know. It's interesting. For some people it works great. Some people it doesn't. And then some people react to the growth hormone surging, peptides, the growth hormone releasing peptides. Mm-hmm. Some people those work great with them. Some, I've heard people using them in combination with exogenous GH, so there's all kinds of protocols and theories out there, but I've had a lot
So
of people
taking
react
both
well
a
to those.
secretagogue and
Yeah.
and exogenous GH together?
Mhm.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. There's all kinds of brave people out there that do all kinds of stuff. But yeah, it's hit or miss with that one.
Okay. So we touched on Anavar, we touched on Nandrolone, we touched on HGH. What other compounds have you seen being scripted? I have heard of Winstrol from time to time. It's rare, but I have
Really?
heard about it. Proviron a lot in Europe. That's like a huge thing. You got high SHBG, let's just give you Proviron.
Yeah. Yeah, that works well for a lot of people. I think after a while, it kind of plateaus out. Just like anything where you try to alter your SBGH. I think where, you know, you can get a result initially, but then something happens, it all equalizes again, and then you're stuck with the same problem. So you would either have to increase your dosage or go off it. You know, that was one of the things we tried to do at the end of a really long anabolic cycle was I would throw in something to alter that, either Proviron or Winstrol or exogenous insulin. And it kind of made the anabolic effect of that cycle last another 3-4 weeks before I shut it down. But I was never able to really alter that for a long period of time with any compound. So you know, and they don't make Proviron anymore. So I don't know where people are getting it anyway. Whether it's, you know, it's not commercially made anymore. Is that correct?
I think they get it compounded in Europe because
that
it's
could be
prescribed everywhere. Because in Europe, what's
Yeah.
happening is, especially for the TRT guys, is the doctors aren't allowed really prescribing more than a given amount. So as soon as they're getting to that max amount, they're not getting it. Oh, we'll give you Proviron, it'll bring down your SHBG. You'll have more free T and you'll feel better. You know, but then you talk to other guys like, you know, Dr. Eric Serrano is like, never touch your SHBG, you never want to lower it.
Yeah.
I personally experimented with Proviron. I ended up getting a vial. It was like 20 milligram capsules, but my SHBG is already kind of on the low side. It's always between 18 to 20. And I took that for about 2 weeks and I wasn't feeling well at all on it. And the guys that are really reporting feeling well, I always find their SHBG is like up there, like in the 40s or 50s. Then they take that and like, wow, my TRT now feels the way I always expected to feel. So I wonder if it's better suited
for how long,
or,
right? But for how long?
Yeah, that I couldn't tell you if they're staying on it all the time or temporarily or cycling it or.
And that's one of the, you know, I agree with Dr. Serrano. I wouldn't use it in that aspect. I would just throw more testosterone at it, you know, and document the issues, document that you're not symptom free at this dose, and then move up. Because I think that's more of a long-term fix than just trying to treat the SBGH number, because I don't think it's linear. I just had another client that I talked to. He's in the UK. Same thing happened. Felt really great on it. Then not so good. Up the dose. Wow, I feel great again. You know, now we're approaching. I'm probably going to mess this up. I think he was north of 50 milligrams already. So I don't know how far that's going to go. You know, and then you're going to have to crash and restabilize. I think Proviron for me, the best way that I've used it is either to, you know, right before a show, to try to dump water and lower estrogen and do all that stuff. Seemed to work okay, but you know, that's a whole nother discussion. And also for a big weekend, you know, if we had a big weekend coming up, me and my wife, and, you know, just wanted to make sure everything was working at 100%. That's one of those ways that I would use Proviron in a manner, or I don't use HCG except for something like that, you know, where I get ready for an event, you know, with my wife or a big weekend. But then afterwards, you know, I crash and burn for a week or two and then restabilize, and then I'm back to normal. So all of these things, you know, if you're going to add to your TRT or you're going to add this or add that, they all have a positive effect, or they should, and they all are going to have a negative effect. Just like caffeine, just like amphetamine, all that stuff. You're going to have an up and you're going to have a down, and eventually it's going to have to equalize somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so for a lot of guys that can, you know, the best add-on, I think, if you're going to add on something to TRT, or if you want to add something else, is just to increase your testosterone for a while. I know that's, you know, maybe that's legal or, you know, possible for some people maybe not, but I think that's probably the safest way to handle adding something on or getting an extra boost out of of your therapy, as long as, you know, your numbers hold and your hematocrit holds and blood pressure doesn't go up.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I had a question now and I'm drawing a blank. Yeah, you touched on estrogen. In your opinion, lowering it, is it really just for the bodybuilding community to get that aesthetic, drawn out look for a show type thing, or do you do anything with that on regular TRT?
For me personally, I never really bought into taking estrogen blockers or aromatase inhibitors just to take it. And so somewhere along the lines, I did a lot of research before I took anything. You know, I researched for about 5 years before I started. You know, I was a bodybuilder before I even touched anything, and then competed in bodybuilding afterwards, of course. But I always thought that the higher my testosterone level was, the higher my estrogen level should be, that there's a balance in there somewhere. I never experienced the big moon face. I never, you know, there was a couple things where I blew up and I was holding a bunch of water, but, you know, I was also fat at the time, or, you know, I was 16, 70% body fat, bulking, you know, trying to reach 300 pounds. And so that made sense. When I got ready for a show, I did experiment with lowering my estrogen. Went through a couple times where I crashed my estrogen and went, you know, had hell to pay for that. And I didn't really see a massive benefit from lowering my estrogen levels and dropping water. But I did learn, and a painful lesson for a lot of bodybuilders is if you're holding water, you're probably still fat. And, you know, there's exceptions to that, but for the most part, amateur bodybuilders that think they're holding water are still fat. And that was the case for me. Dropping estrogen didn't allow that to, you know, that to be skipped. So I still had.
Would you use a diuretic for that, I guess, at that point, without messing
Yeah, I
around
went
with the
deep into
hormone side?
diuretics too. And back to the same lesson, man. If you still have body fat on, it's not the water, it's fat. So yeah, we even went as far as I was taking blood pressure in between, you know, prejudging and doing that so I didn't black out and all that shit. And for me personally, a mild diuretic, something like diazide, you know, a day before, maybe the night before, and continuing to drink water after being carved up properly, worked the best for me. And for my wife, not even the diazide, we do a dandelion tea. And as long as we kept her drinking water and fluids throughout, she was bone dry, but she didn't have any fat on her also. So for me, it was always you know, it's a body fat issue, not magical holding water.
Gotcha.
You know, and I think that's where a lot of guys go wrong too. I know this is probably off topic, but the more drugs you throw at the equation, the harder all that stuff gets. You know, when I competed naturally, it was easier to drop body fat. It was harder to hold on muscle during that process, but I could get very lean and I'd be ready for the show. I was dry all the time. I didn't have to worry about any of that. Carbing up was kind of difficult. But then when, you know, first 4 or 5 times that I tried to get in decent shape and step on stage with drugs on board, it was a lot more complicated. You know, you just kept throwing stuff at it, and it's everything that you throw in the mix is just another variable with all kinds of other things to deal with. So, but I think that's the same with, you know, that translates well to guys that are on TRT and just trying to maximize everything. Now, I really, and this may not be the answer a lot of people are looking for, but you really have to dive into your nutrition and training to see if you're taking advantage of everything, and if you're truly pushing yourself and pushing yourself the right way before you add something else onto it. Because, you know, if you're stuck at a plateau, I really doubt 100 milligrams of nandrolone a week is going to help you break through that. You know, I really doubt it. It might, you can prove me wrong, but it's usually a problem with the training and nutrition and sleep and recovery and all that stuff at that point.
Got it. Yeah, I guess for a lot of guys, just taking, you know, I'll just take this and that'll fix everything. And it's, the other stuff could be harder.
It does for a while, but,
yeah.
or it may for a while. Yeah.
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 You wanted to touch on metformin as well.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, there's some guys that are just chanting and screaming from the rooftops that everybody and their mother should be on metformin. What's your take on that?
Well, I think the more that people read and these nuanced studies about the mitochondrial action of metformin in rats or whatever they are, the translation of that information into how it affects a guy that's 30, 40 years old, taking it to improve insulin sensitivity or whatever, is a big stretch. And so that's when you get all these guys saying it's going to, hinder your muscle gains and all this. Now I'm speaking from personal experience. I've been on metformin regularly for probably the last 5 years, maybe 4.5, 5 years. Before that, it was spotty. Before, when I tried to use metformin, it was very hard to get. It was difficult to get. And I used it because I was on a fairly large dose of exogenous growth hormone. And I wanted that to combat the insulin sensitivity issues that come along with that. But to my error, I didn't stay on it long enough. I didn't use it while I was on metformin. And again, like I said, it was really hard to get. So I would take it for a couple weeks and then be off. So I don't know if I really realized the benefit of that. But for me and for most of the people that I've tried to help, metformin is a great tool to reset your insulin sensitivity. That's it. I haven't seen any muscle gain or muscle loss or gain slow down or any of that stuff. Metformin is very touchy to some people's stomachs, right? You either can take it or you can't. And I don't think if you're a person that your lower bowel explodes on the first dose of metformin, I don't know if you can ever get over that. Had a client take it and not be able to sleep at night. We really isolated everything else except for that. And it wouldn't let them sleep very good at night. So we stopped. Some people just can't take it. But if you're one of the people that can take it and you're worried about all these other things, you might just take it in a cyclic manner where you're on it for a few months out of the year to make sure your insulin sensitivity is in check. You have a great relationship with insulin and then move on. And maybe do it again, some other time during the year. It really depends on where you're at diet wise and your potential or your relationship with insulin. But all the data that I've seen and read, and I try to keep up on all of it, nothing has changed my mind about using metformin. I've been on it. I've been off of it. I've tried a lower dose. I've tried higher dosages. For me, 1,000 milligrams a day, easier to stay lean. It's effective. I have a better relationship with insulin than I did, 6 years ago. My insulin sensitivity is much better than it was. And that's it. So I think that's healthy. I don't know if it's going to make me live any longer. I don't really care. But if my insulin sensitivity is better and I can process carbs more efficiently and better, then I think I'm healthier overall.
Is that kind of a standard dose, you would say, or what's a typical standard starting dose for?
Yeah, I've seen, starting dose. I wouldn't go over 500 to start. And so I think a lot of physicians will start you at 500 and see if you have stomach issues, and then either keep you there or bump you up to 1,000. I tried 2,000 and 3,000 milligrams, didn't really notice any benefit or perceived benefit. So 1,000 is where I tend to stay.
And you're judging it based on how you feel, or you're judging it based on blood work? You're judging
how easy it is. Well, there's not really any blood work change for me. My A1C lower, it was already low. My, fasting insulin, all of that stuff was within range, but I can process carbs better. I can eat more carbohydrates now and not get fat. And to me, that says that something's changed with my normal metabolic metabolism, whatever. And it's different now than it was 6-7 years ago. So that's kind of what I'm basing it on. I do have clients that are obese and fat that have gone on metformin, and for whatever reason, it's curbing your appetite. It's improving their insulin sensitivity. It just seems to add with all the other efforts that we're doing to get the body fat off and stay off. And a lot of my peers that, all started this journey with me with metformin 5-6 years ago, all kind of report, and my wife too, when we go off of metformin, it seems a little bit more difficult to stay at the level of leanness that we are. And so for whatever reason, that's why I choose to stay on it and use it, and the perceived benefit of, my insulin sensitivity, keep them in check. Now you can do the same thing with berberine. I really believe that. Berberine, you want to get a brand that's very reputable, something like BioTrust or Thorne, because there's a lot of fake berberines out there. But if you get a berberine source, I think you can do the same thing with it as well. And there's a lot less stomach issues with berberine. Gotcha. And then of course, anytime that you're supplementing metformin, you want to keep B12 and B complex. I would suggest a B complex coming in just to be safe, or to get your levels tested and see if you need it.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned, you said, I was fat. And then you mentioned 15 to 16% body fat. I'm more than 15 to 16 body fats. I feel bad now, but what would you say is that, do you have an ideal body fat range where you think is I consider this to be healthy. I consider this to be everyone's goal. That, yes, if you get the numbers lower, then you're going to be more aesthetically.
Well, I think it depends how you have your body fat tested. If you're doing a caliper reading and they take into account for your age, then I don't think that's a fair assessment. But if you had a DEXA scan or something done and it shows you at, whatever, that's pretty accurate. What do I think is healthy? Sub 15s for most people. Females, sub 20s probably.
Gotcha.
But if you're a male and you can take your shirt off and be comfortable at the beach, that's what I consider the check. Not fully comfortable, right? Nobody's fully comfortable, but if you can take your shirt off and enjoy yourself and not worry about it, you're probably at a decent percent of body fat. If you have visible abs of some sort and you're not carrying, you don't have massive love handles or something, you're probably getting there, but it's a personal preference. I think sub 15 is probably healthy. 12 is probably a little bit healthier, but some people, it's hard to, it's a disciplined life to stay there for most guys, it is, but this is a lifestyle. So
I find it funny when you said comfortable, because I've been to the beach many times and there's always the 250, 350 pound guy just lies there like a beached whale and he looks comfortable. He doesn't really seem to care.
Well, how much cortisol and stress is that guy creating by taking none, right? So if you're at a point where you're not stressing yourself out by taking your shirt off, I think you're in a pretty healthy space, and it's healthier physiologically and mentally for you. But yeah, I mean, there's always those guys, and they might live to be 100. I don't know, just because they don't have a worry-free life. I don't the art of not giving a fuck. But for most males, if you have visible abs, not shredded veins on your abs, but if you have a visible outline in your abs, I think you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have to agree there.
But the leaner you get, the more efficient food works in you, the more efficient your drugs work in you, the more efficient your supplements work. Everything works better when you're leaner. There's a point where you drop off. For me, it's where I'm approaching 6%, that life really, really sucks. But man, anything that I'm taking at that time, whether it be a supplement, TRT, everything works much better. It just works better. And so I think that, the healthier, the lower in body fat that you can maintain without killing yourself year round, the healthier you're going to be.
So where would you say for you, your specific case, where you feel the best balance of my body fat is low enough that I find I look pretty good, but I also feel good?
9, 10.
9 or 10?
Yeah, that's where I like to stay. If I'm approaching 12, it's fat camp at the house. We get rid of everything. Of course, my wife and I both are pretty diligent. And when we hit a point where we feel uncomfortable, it's, the machine kicks back on and then it's on. But we both are that way. We have a range that we like to stay in. And sometimes it's harder than others. Sometimes it's easier, but that's the balance. And it never goes away. You don't lose fat and then all of a sudden one day, wow, life is great, I don't have to worry about it anymore. It's a constant thing, but it's a discipline, and that's the lifestyle. I mean, you know how it is. You can't just get, hey, I gained 10 pounds of muscle, great, everything's fine, it's going to be here forever. No, you got to fight to keep that shit on, right? Yeah. And then the older you get, the harder the fight is, but that's the life. You have to enjoy that journey of eating healthy and doing cardio or whatever you have to do to stay in that range, but you have to enjoy being there and you have to enjoy doing it, or else I don't think it's able to last.
Absolutely. Well said. Anything we didn't touch on, Jim, the things you wanted to talk about here?
No, I think that was it. We just covered kind of some add-ons for TRT. Again, guys, I would just, look at your markers, see how you feel. If you have a risk of cardiovascular history and you're battling to keep your numbers well and you're battling to keep your blood pressure down, I probably wouldn't take anything else. I really wouldn't, because you're not going to gain 20 pounds of muscle. It's not like you're talking about, okay, I'm going to do this cycle and I'm going to gain 10 pounds and then I'm not going to do one again. Well, number one, that never works out. You're always going to do more. But number two, this isn't that. You're not going to gain 10 pounds of muscle. You might get a little bit more recovery. You might get a little bit more, a couple more reps here and there, but is that worth the risk that you're putting yourself in for that time? I would be honest with yourself when asking yourself those questions.
Gotcha. Jim, how do people reach out to you for consulting? Guys, if you haven't already figured this out, Jim does some consulting and coaching.
Yeah, you can hit me on Facebook or through Twitter. It's at TRT Jim. What I usually do if guys come at me with drug questions, whatever it be, I usually do $100 for an hour or however long it takes discussion. And I'm happy to go through anything and everything at that point. Happy to correspond with you afterwards to kind of help you. But, usually that's guys that want to, or want to experiment with the exogenous insulin or whatever and want to hear my thoughts about it. But that's normally what I do. Full-time clients, I'm pretty booked on, so I'm not really accepting more of those. But I can always do, hour consults with guys.
Gotcha.
But happy to help.
Awesome. Guys, if you like this video, click the like button. Just click, it takes a second. Just click the like button and subscribe and the notification bell. It's not asking you for much, right? Just do that. We see that, we're going to keep doing these videos. As simple as that. Jim, thanks for your time. This was great. Have to keep coming back, having you back on. We always get a lot of requests for your stuff. So
sure, man. Anytime. Awesome. I'll tell you what I think anytime. So no problem with that. Anyway, hope you guys find some value with it.
Absolutely. I'm sure we will. Thank you very much.